Yeah, it got right. It got that's what I was remembering. It got a slaying reduction. So, that's certainly big. Okay, that's a lot of well, I guess it doesn't matter too much. Make sure to hit Mr. Vampire Knight. Yeah, well, that is true, but that was just a superficial change. It was just a name change. They were called Claymores for a while. Yeah, it was called Claymore, and double swords were called Bastard Swords. But there was no other substantive change. It was just a rename because Kilobyte made that change. He didn't like how triple swords were nonsense from a weapons standpoint. He had a thing for certain kinds of realism, and he felt like it was silly because it would never make a realistic weapon. It's just a thing, a gripe that he had. But you know, Crawl is a silly game. Most people thought it was cute. You've seen him up bad. Yeah, I think there's a really good one of the very bad movies I think you're thinking of. It's probably linked in here. Yeah, that's probably it. And that's probably literally the movie that you're talking about, because that's exactly what happens in that clip. Clip is pretty ridiculous. It's a terrible 80s B movie. A guy with a triple sword. It might be. And yeah, it's a really cheesy scene. I mean, it's not insanely rare. It's as rare as other, you know, as other weapons. I think it might, well, it might be interesting to do it, just address what it does. Maybe transmutations and miscasts flat out aren't the best thing. Or, yeah, no, I thought I said the wrong school, but I said the right school. I mean, it works better on some things than it does than others. It's mostly because of some attendant issues with polymorph, like healing monsters and stuff, and it's not, well, I don't know. Unlike, say, Scythe of Curses, where all the necromancy stuff is like, it's either susceptible to it or not, and if it's susceptible to it, it's a beneficial effect to some extent. The polymorph thing is slightly... really good special. Oh, I'd like to see that then. I should check that out. What's up, Doxine? Doxine? Yeah. Yeah, there are restrictions. Poly is the target monster is based on HD, so there's like a fuzzing that happens where it can go to a monster that's somewhat higher, somewhat lower. So if the monster is lower HD, it can't just jump up to, you know, something with 20 HD, but it can go higher. And obviously you could polymorph it multiple times and kind of get it progressively higher. And also it has to stay within the same holiness. And there's natural holiness, undead holiness, demonic holiness, and holy holiness. And so you have to turn a demon into another demon, which gives some hilarious results because it is possible to get Grinder the Executioner, for instance. Guy from Night Court. Wow. Bull? I think that was the character's name in Night Court, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it's biased towards higher, but it can't roll. it can't roll lower as well. Oh, speaking of Grunt. Grunt's done it again. He's got me the skull and crossbones crypt ending. Oh, I spoiled it. I spoiled what this vault is shaped like. Sorry. Grunt. This one is not too bad, really. It has quite like a mix of monsters. Well, you know, it's actually not. There's just not a lot of endings. All the many of the endings are encompassed, and they're just the same flat chance. It has no extra weighting. The only thing that can happen is that there are some endings that can generate as subvaults in existing levels. Therefore, the level can generate a veto because any level that's generated through what's called a layout, which is heavily procedurally generated code that makes the encompassing level. The way normal levels generate in crawl is a layout is sort of chosen, and that layout can be an encompass vault like this one, where the entire map is basically pre-specified with some randomization happening within it, but it's not a series. It's not like it's a series of rules saying like draw a bone, draw a skull, or whatever. It's actually a more or less fixed map, especially in this case. And all the randomization is mostly little bits of level structure maybe and monsters. But those encompass maps are a possibility, or something we call an actual layout. And the layout is like this big mass of Lua code that actually like draws structures in the level. It draws walls. It can do sort of any arbitrary complicated thing depending on what the layout is. And those levels, the way those work is the layout draws the outline of the level, and then it picks a primary vault, which is otherwise just a normal vault, but it picks that as the basis for the layout, and it actually picks that and builds the layout around it. And then once the primary vault's picked and the layout's built around the primary vault, then it starts placing what it calls secondary vaults, where it just goes through and has chances to pick additional vaults. And after it's done some of that, so it has a couple of steps for vault placement, it looks at the level and says, okay, is this level a problem for connectivity reasons? And levels can generate connectivity problems all the time, and then it gets what's called a veto. If it fails the check, it just starts the entire process all over again for picking the layout, the layout, and then picking a primary vault and building the level around the primary vault, or maybe it'll pick an encompass. So what happens is those vaults that place in a layout, maybe they generate vetoes, and the encompass maps, though, they're never going to generate a veto because they're specified in such a way that just can't happen because their structure is so fixed. Generally, they can't generate a veto. There are some special things they can try to place that might not exist in the game, and the game might veto it for that reason. So that's a very quick primer on how crawl level gen works. And its vault placement for those layout-based levels is fairly primitive, where it like lays down a vault and sees if it doesn't overwrite anything it shouldn't, and if it does, it'll try to rotate it and it'll move it around. And it's not terribly sophisticated, and it does generate quite a bit of vetoes. It really depends on what the layout is, though. Certain vaults that it would select also are prone to generating vetoes because they're prone to generating disconnected areas, say. So that's one thing that can influence and make an encompass map like this more common relative to the ones that use an actual layout, but otherwise there's no actual bias for this map. It's just in the set of possible maps. So it can really seem like, oh, I always get this, but that's, if you don't do all that many games, it's sort of a clustering thing. Like I certainly get this map a ton, but I also get the other ones. Yeah, cognitive bias. Especially if you like don't like a map, every time you get it, you're gonna be like, God damn this again. Now, I don't really mind this map at all. Certainly has a lot of monsters. And you kind of have to use luring a lot. That part I don't really love. It does have a good variety to the monsters that it has. People tend to like Evil Mike's like spooky forest one a lot. You know, it's a huge encompass map with like a long forest trail, and then it leads to this huge like church thing with like, you know, a graveyard behind it, and it's got a bunch of little substructures. People cite that one a lot as one they like. That's another encompass map made by a different dev. I should make a crypt ending sometime. Crypt endings aren't usually that exciting though. You know, Crypt the Branch isn't honestly that exciting. It's better than it used to be. People remember like the 0.12 versions of Crypt. It was so easy. I mean, it's still quite an easy level overall, but it was sort of ridiculously so. But even now, the monsters in it aren't anything particularly exciting. That's why one of the big long-term projects I really want to see for Crawl is making the branches really like more meaningful, as there's some interesting kind of like mechanic, you know, both simultaneously doing the thing where you shorten the game to the meaningful parts of it. That includes levels, also the size of levels. So many levels are just too big, with of course so many popcorn fights. You don't want the intensity of the game to be like, you know, ridiculous so that it feels, it's not, you know, obviously you can have things like difficulty settings, and that's a whole other kind of parallel issue. You know, if you can make a default setting that's sort of more challenging but have ways of adjusting the difficulty, but you can reduce the number of levels, you can reduce the size of levels, try to make the combat more meaningful. But I would love for the branches to really have something distinct mechanistically going on, so that it wasn't so much of like, okay, now you're in the spooky level and now all the monsters are ghosts and they're themed like undead. And now you're in the snake level and everything's themed like a snake, and it's like, you know, there's certainly some things you can do with like AC EV profiles. Elliptic and I were talking about this maybe a year ago. Like, he was commenting how he didn't like I think he said he didn't like the Swamp Monster set because there wasn't really good kind of overarching consistency to like their defensive profile. It was just this huge smattering of everything that had come from the old Forest Branch project, plus the original monsters, plus stuff that got tweaked. But if you look at some other branches, there's some consistency to the core monsters. And of course there's other monsters there too that are in the mix, but there's a core set of monsters that have kind of a unifying defensive profile, if you will. And you can certainly do some of that, so that you're making decisions about, I want to go to this branch because, you know, Snake, for instance, has slow moving monsters that have a lot of HP and overall fairly high-ish defenses, versus going to Spider, where you have fast monsters with a much lower AC HP profile and maybe just EV, so that there's some build choice going on. So that's one thing, but more the idea of like thinking mechanistically too about, you know, there's a mechanism in this branch that forces you to do this, be that getting to downstairs in a short amount of time. I mean, it's hard to come up with good ideas, but something where it's meaningful going from branch to branch. It's not just a thematic exercise. Mikey had brainstormed this desert branch replacement for swamp a while back, and we were talking about some of the things that we might put in that, so that you would have a branch choice and you would have an aspect to it. And it's not that the aspects all would have to work the same way, or that all of them would absolutely necessarily have to have it, but quicksand. Yeah, it was going to be something like we were just sort of sketching stuff, so this is nothing final, but it was going to be something like you know, I think it was roughly something like hallucinations could happen. I don't know if we had another better idea, but I'm just sort of recalling one of the past conversations where like hallucinations could happen where you would get monsters kind of coming in and you could get to oases in the level which would probably be near stairs where they would cease, to pick one kind of example. So as you were wandering out, eventually you could get, you know, monsters coming at you because they were like hallucination monsters, you know, wandering in the desert as a kind of an idea. And but if you got to the oasis, that would cease. So you couldn't spend, you would have to be aware of where you were relative to stairs and stuff. Just as an example, not saying that that would actually work, but it's a kind of idea. And so instead of every branch is like, yeah, now you're going to get the different set of monsters and they're all going to be snakes, it would be, okay, well, in the snake branch, there's this kind of problem to deal with, if you will. Some of that requires, in order for it to not like induce a lot of fatigue, you know, obviously whatever you pick as a mechanism has to be interesting enough, good enough, and not really, really aggravating. You know, it has to feel satisfying when you overcome it, and it has to not overstay its welcome. That can mean not having branches that are too long, so maybe even shortening branch length down to, you know, 3 levels, maybe 2. Some of that stuff has to go hand in hand if you want to make the overall experience good. Yeah, Mikey has a write-up for his desert branch. Let me see if I can find it really quick. Oh yeah. He wrote this back in 2018. And one thing he always said, the desert has to be yellow and it has to have no water. And he was very insistent about those two things. It's like, Gamma Funk, there can't be any water and it has to be yellow. I'm like, alright, Mikey. Whatever you say, boss. Profane Servitor. We went toe to toe. He took down half my HP with his... Oh, it was just Venom. You should have had Vamp, bro. Bro, you made a bad weapon choice, bro. You chose Venom. You could have had Vamp. Oh wait, I have RN3, so maybe you made the right choice. Well, you were screwed either way because I have R Poison Infinity. I pranked you, bro. Why, thank you. What do we got here? Enchant weapon. A Rang. Carrying a Staff of Death. Somehow I don't think I'm going to need that. Oh, Lasty. Why do you do this to me with your Harm Amulet, Lasty? Convenient Arlek. It's not swappable, Lasty. I could have Strength. I could have Int -5, which I wouldn't care about. I could have Arlek, but I'm not wearing your Harm Amulet. Nice try. RF plus, RC minus. With that, I don't know what that, does that refer to my amulet or does it refer to that write-up? I have 3 scrolls of enchant weapon. I could enchant up an alternate, yeah, the amulet. Yeah, I mean, harm is technically optimal. I just don't want to deal with it. You have to swap it off if anything nasty comes about. Kind of generally a pain. Works really well with ranged. Well, and I do have, of course, javelins, but I'm not really ready. 2, only 2. I have so few digging. It's unfair. Oh, you hexer, you. You hexed me. Wait, was that? No, maybe that was heavily damage. Ah, okay, never mind. That wasn't the Lich. Two rangs. One of these is going to be epic. Oh yeah, well, okay. I guess it's not really that epic. Because I already have a +3 and a +4. Gosh darn it. Dagnabbit. Where's my epic rang? I deserve more than this. The Bone Dragon. I don't know why I'm ducking around a corner when I could get some free damage in. Overall, it's been pretty easy. It's nice being like, you know, RN3, RC. Ah, Flayed Ghost, I don't care about you. Oh my god, dude. Oh my god, there's still no cloak. That scarf, I didn't even like... And this is the first scarf. Wow. The first cloak ever. Okay, this I am curious about. Slimy plate. Dang. I mean, well, I am going to be alive a lot. Do I otherwise have Art Poison? I do. It's like 1 point more AC. Art Core I don't really care about. I mean, it's a very decent plate. You can win the game in this plate, no problem. Just that, what's more useful, 1 AC or like the weird resists? I mean, the int is useless, unfortunately. Regen is alright, you know? So I'll probably stick with my current one. I guess I'm also gonna stick... hopefully this is Guardian Spirit. Oh no, I only have 10 because anti-magic. Oh, well that's... you know. We can live with that. Yeah, I mean, I was considering switching it because... you know, our core is obviously not a great property. It's like, oh, if I fight Shrikes or something, it's nice to not have to swap a ring. I'll eat some jabs. Should have a jab lunch. Why don't you stop by Gamma Funk's jab shop? Bring the family, snack on some jabs. What are we gonna get? Let's see. I guess I'll Brothers in Arm. Alright. Hit you. These guys are gonna MR2 me. I'm gonna go. Hope that with Trog's hand up and anti-magic doing its thing. So I have enough for the manual of dodging now. This is almost done, so I should probably go ahead and buy that. I do actually have good decks, so we're gonna go buy that. That was an easy crypt. Oh, I guess I need to get out of Bloodlust now. Earlier I bought a manual of armor. I'll go ahead and put on both of these. And we'll just say preemptively 18, I guess. Well, with +1 and +4 on top, it's... Oh wow, I have 11. Wow, we're gonna get some... We're gonna get some good gold dragon scales. Okay, I need to revivify. Now I have temporary frail. Work that off and get some HP back. Ready to go to, I assume this is a Metroid remix, isn't it? Indeed. So I could go to L3, but there's not really any need for it, and I already got a bunch of extra XP from Crypt. Let's just head over to Depths. Well, hello. Okay. Should have known better than to mess with the Rakshasa. Wait. Oh. This is summons. You know what? I don't like you, Rakshasa. Don't like you at all. Oh, I know this vault. I think. That little weird looking shape, I think I know what that vault is. Oh no, Flayed Ghost. Oh my god. It's that unkillable Flayed Ghost for some reason. Now we got our full HP back. We need to train more fighting at some point. Actually it's way less expensive, so I'm gonna work on that for a while, even over our... Yep, that was this. I'm pretty... Yeah, this... Am I? Huh. Maybe not. These guys don't like silver javelins at all. Hurts them real bad. Two juggernaut skeletons. You get such strong skeletons, bro. Your friends from the gym?